Blessings. Welcome to today's Law Enforcement Daily Devotional. I just want to tell you right off the bat, um, I made way more notes, 3 pages of notes just out of Matthew. Luckily, Mark and Luke were very similar, but I doubt I'll get through all of it today. So remember, if you want the notes to dig a little deeper or whatnot, just send me an email at chuck@fcpo.org. So let's get into today. We had Matthew 19 and 20, which is where I'm going to stay, but also we read Mark 10 and Luke 18. And I wanted, man, right off the bat, yesterday we spoke about making a move towards God. And I love that whole thought. And so when we got into today's read, that thread continued, making a move towards God. And then we finished yesterday with being humble and Jesus teaching that lesson. Well, again, Jesus continues in that same thought, in that same process, and he gives some examples today. So it's really cool how, you know, the Bible is like a spider web and it's all connected. We just got to look for it and see it. A lot of times I just absolutely miss stuff, but I was blessed to be able to see this today. It was really cool. Matthew 19:16, the rich young ruler, and I'm sure you've all heard this story, but he comes to Jesus like a brave paladin or a knight in shining armor, and he wants to slay the dragon. He says, King, what can I do for you? I'm so brave, and I want to prove to you that my bravery and my skills and my courage can help you in your kingdom. Just that kind of thought as I read this, just because he comes up to Jesus, he says, what good thing shall I do? It just, I wasn't there. The kid may have been totally sincere, and he is a good Jew, okay? Even though I'm making light of this, he's a good Jew, and we're going to see this. 18, verse 18, it seems like a silly question, but if it were me and Jesus said, he says, what shall I do? And Jesus says, well, you should, fulfill the commandments. You should obey the commandments. And the rich young ruler goes, which one? Which ones? And again, silly question. If it were me, I would have said all of them. Why would you ask me that? But Jesus um, doesn't come at him with that kind of a critical answer. That would be me and my flesh. Jesus does not do that. Jesus, um, he comes to him and Jesus says, he gives him a list of 5 commandments. Thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not commit adultery. And then it's interesting, he throws in 5 of the 10 commandments, but then he throws in a new commandment. And this is Jesus later on, he says, a new commandment I give to you. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. So at the end of this, Jesus gives 5 of the 10 commandments, and he says, love your neighbor as yourself. And I love how he incorporates that in with them. So the rich young ruler says, well, all of these I have done. Um, Jesus had given him 5. Now there's 5 that Jesus didn't mention, right? Well, 4 of those 5 are the first 4 that have everything to do with God. And the reason I think this guy was a good Jew is because Jesus knew and didn't want to confront him with these 4, because I think he felt like this was a good Jew. And thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make any graven images. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, and do not use the Lord's name in vain. Now, I'm pretty sure I probably didn't get those in order, but those are the first 4 commandments. So we get those 4, then Jesus gives 5. He leaves one out, and he leaves one out for a very good reason, because if the guy thinks that he is sinless and he follows the 10 commandments, Jesus is going to point out the one commandment that is I think this rich young ruler's bane of existence. Jesus leaves out, don't covet your neighbor's possessions. This is a rich young ruler. He has got a lot of money, and he loves his money. And we're going to see that because Jesus will tell him, um, go sell everything and then come follow me. Man, Jesus was just totally sincere in that. Go sell all that you have and come follow me. Well, the rich young ruler, he covets. Covetousness is his big sin. That's the one of 10 that gets him. And instead of obeying, he drops his head and he goes away sad because he owns a lot of property and he's not going to get rid of his stuff. That's his hang up. And Jesus told us earlier, you cannot serve both God and money. You'll either love the one and hate the other, or despise the one. Anyway, you can't serve them both. This rich young ruler decided to serve and love his money more than he loved following Jesus. Sad story. And then let's see, chapter 20. Well, I take it back. Let's go back up to 19 because it's got a great way that it ends. In verse 30, any statement that comes out of the mouth of Jesus is important. I think we would all agree with that. But when Jesus continues to mention the same thing over and over and over again, and specifically the same phrase, if he uses the same words in the same phrase and he keeps telling his apostles, his disciples, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. If you want to, Jesus came to serve, and you got to be like him. You got to die to yourself. All right, yeah, die to yourself, pick up your cross, and follow Jesus daily. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Humble yourself. Don't put yourself at the front of the line. Get behind the table and serve people. And then once everybody's been served, then you get some food. You're loving your neighbor well, and you're humbling yourself. This is what Jesus is talking about. I'm not saying that example encompasses all of it, but you get the gist. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Service, humility, humble yourself. Then let's get into chapter 20, verse 1. To put this into perspective, Jesus tells the story of a landowner. Remember, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Remember that. In 2 through 7, the landowner hires men to come work in his field early in the morning, and he agrees to pay him a denarii. So they come in and work, and then a little bit later he goes back to the town square, and there's a few more guys. It's like, hey, come work in my fields. They come work. Maybe they put in a 6-hour day as opposed to 8. Then later he gets a couple more and says, man, I know there's only 4 hours left in the day, but come do some work for me. I'll hire you. And then the last hour of the day before evening gets there's 1 hour left, and he goes and he finds some people, and he says, why are y'all still here? And they say, nobody's hired us yet. And he says, well, I'll hire you. Come work for me. So they go work for him. Then at the end of the day, this master of the field, this owner, tells his servant, go pay everybody the same amount, starting with the last ones, the last group, and then make your way to the first group. The first shall be last and the last shall be first. That was the order and how he paid them. The ones who had been there 8 hours a day, 8 hours that day or longer, get mad, and they said, why do they get the same amount of money that we get? And the landowner says, are you jealous because I'm so generous? Did I not give you the amount of money that I promised to pay you? And if I want to pay them the same amount, what business is that of yours? The first shall be last and the last shall be first. But the attitude that Jesus is getting to here is very important. You can't say, well, I became a Christian at 9 years old and I've served you all my life. How come when I get to heaven, I don't get a higher spot than this guy who was a reprobate all his life, and at 80 years old on his deathbed, he accepted Christ. He was only a Christian for 2 hours before he died. I was a Christian for 60 years. You see what I'm saying? That's the attitude. And that is followed up, I'm running out of time, that's followed up by James and John asking for Jesus for positions to sit at his right and his left when he gets to his throne in heaven. They didn't get it. They follow up with a question that contradicts everything Jesus had just taught them. We've got to be careful. Anyway, tomorrow we're going to be Matthew chapter 20 and 26, Mark chapter 10 and chapter 14, Luke chapter 18 and 19, and John chapter 11. So I will see you tomorrow. In the meantime, be safe.